Awesome. Did you see anything in Build that you haven't had a chance to try yet, and you thought, wow, that looks exciting, I can't wait to play with that?
Yeah, surprisingly, there is actually one thing that I haven't tried yet, and that is the AI content safety. So one of the things which we've released is this new service, specifically that's geared towards AI like content safety. So this makes it extremely easy to integrate in your applications. So if you wanted to vet a prompt before you pass it to ChatGPT for any sort of specifically like harmful self-harm or violent like content, that's something which now you can do very easily. And before it was sort of really easy, but it was sort of integrated already in Azure OpenAI, and it still is integrated. There still is a content like filtering, but now you can sort of like it's its own independent like service that you can integrate in your apps, which I think is cool. There's also the Microsoft Fabric, which I haven't yet got to play around with yet, but it is essentially the unification of all of our data services together with our analytics like services. So our like Power BI for visualization, our Synapse for our data engineering. So if you want to spit up like your like data pipelines, your data like warehousing, so the idea of like storing your data and warehousing like tons and tons of data, all the way to the end of actually visualizing this raw data. You can do end to end now in the single one like platform called Microsoft like Fabric, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that looked really amazing to me. If anyone has not had a look at Build yet, it's free. Just search for Microsoft Build 2023. You can register, go in there. Everything was recorded, so you'll be able to pick what recordings you want to see. But on the homepage, they've put like the 6 keynote highlights, and they're so good. Like just watch the Satya one; it just blows you away with all of these cool things that you can do, and you can kind of really get the summary. It's great if you're prepping for interviews, because if you just watch those highlights, those 6 highlight sessions, you will get enough content to talk about in your interviews and seem like you're the smartest person in the room, because there's so much in there, and it's really, really cool, and it's really well presented, so you'll understand it very clearly.
Yep, definitely encourage to look at those past Microsoft Build sessions, which finished up late last week, I believe, Michelle.
I don't know. I'm still only on the 3rd of those highlight sessions, because I watch them and then I'm kind of pausing it to like look up whatever, they put resources up on the screen and they say like sign up here for early access lists and stuff like that. So I keep pausing it to sign up for things and have a look at things and or play with things. And yeah, it's so good. It's so engaging and interesting. So yeah, I don't even know when it finished, but I'm aware that I haven't got through even a tiny bit of it.
Yeah, there's so many sessions. Yeah, so many sessions. Any questions? Anybody wants to come off mute? I can put my LinkedIn in the chat if you want to connect with me after. Feel free to also send me a message there. But yeah, feel free to come off mute now or put your question in the chat window. But if and yeah, I'll hang around for a few more minutes.
Everyone always so shy. See how they all run away when when you ask for questions. I'm only laughing because that is exactly what I would have done too.
Yeah. So yeah, I've just put my LinkedIn in the chat. Feel free to connect with me, and if you want to ask me the question there, that's also fine. And I'll also put my Microsoft email for common courtesy if you want to email me, if that's easier for you too.
That would not be common courtesy for me. I have about 2,000 unread emails. before emailing me, just sit in my inbox.
That's a number. That's a number.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I really need to, I don't know. Well, no, I can't wait for all of those Copilot things to come into play, where hopefully that Copilot for Outlook will just organize my inbox and answer my emails for me. That's what I'm hoping for.
Can you generate 30 different Office rules to organize my emails, please? I want to be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't think you even need to tell it that. I think it will do stuff.
Oh, that would be game changing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, how I already used, like this morning, Ben asked me if I had written the things that he asked me for our newsletter, and he asked me for like a 100-word article on something community related, and I had completely forgotten. And so then I felt really guilty and felt, well, I need to do better. So I had ChatGPT generate me 4 different articles on different community events, all of 100 words each, and just gave him all 4 of them with pictures, because I thought he can use them for the next newsletter as well if I'm too late for this one, because
yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, so like even just then, like using ChatGPT as a tool to assist, like I'm sure a lot of people right now are doing that exact same thing, right? And there are just so many applications of ChatGPT, and that's like one of them, just using it as a tool to help your day-to-day jobs. While other companies and organizations around the world are currently trying to figure out how do you incorporate LLMs into their own like day-to-day operations. How do you use it to parse unstructured data to make things more faster, or how do you use it to analyze and draw insights? Very, very important things.
yeah, I used it for some of the feedbacks for the Connect requests. So where you're writing feedback for people's quarterly or annual review. Obviously, I didn't use it for yours.
Oh, thank you.
But I
It's like
did use it for I did use it for, so Graham Foster, he's also a cloud solution architect who has worked with me on quite a lot of things and spoken at a lot of conferences. And I asked it to write the feedback for him. I gave it like the 4 categories that we need to fill out. And I told it a few things about the work he has done with me. And it just filled in all those sections for me.
Oh, ideas.
And
You're giving me ideas, Michelle. I like that.
yeah, well, because sometimes you get a lot of those requests, and
Yeah.
I don't want to like not do any of them. I know some people just ignore them, but I didn't want to do that. He
Increase
couldn't
the
tell
temperature.
because we were teaching together. We were teaching the GitHub workshop together, and he was talking about, how these different co-pilots and things help you with all sorts of things. And he jokingly said, oh, you could use it for feedback requests. And I said, I did use it for yours. And he looked astounded because he couldn't tell. Didn't realize at all that it wasn't my words.
Yep. And if you're doing it for multiple people, you just change the temperature to 1, right? And then it'll give you different, and they'll never know. It won't be consistent. It will be very creative responses each time.
For each of them, I did tell it like things that I had done with that person, or things that they were famous for or whatever. So it did have original ones.
Naturally pretty unique. Gotcha. Yeah.
It was already, it wasn't that I didn't know what they had done for me. It was more that just, crafting the words for all of those things there's just like a lot. And so it just wrote it out for me, and most of them are good. And there was only one for a girl on my team, Claire, who is like a Marcoms person, so marketing comms, and it couldn't do her. It kept throwing out these really generic things for Marcoms type people, but she isn't generic, she's special. She does special stuff. So I had to do hers by hand, by force.
Yeah. It's one of those cases. Yeah, if you give it like a very general prompt with general context, it will most likely give you a general answer. So yeah, that's just like another natural thing, a natural occurrence of GPT models.
But I'm okay if, like, very rarely it can't help me. If most of the time it does help me, it's still a massive time saver.
Yeah,
And
and that's
a guy I was speaking to at one of the universities, he's doing a PhD, but he's an international student, and he said it was really helping him because his problem is writing things in very beautiful English. He knows the content of what he wants to say, he has the original ideas, but his English is not particularly beautiful, and so he would give his content to it and say, can you rewrite this in good English, and it's writing it out really nicely. That's a really great advantage, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Also using it for translation, my experience is being one of the best services out there for like translation, like use cases. I've sat down with customers and they've said that OpenAI's, ChatGPT does a much better translation than any translator that's on the internet right now, just because it understands like the context too, and it's able to understand what people are saying, like how people are communicating with said like language. And so that's not something that most translators actually have in context. So it has that chat sort of experience over these translations, which like ultimately improves the translation itself, because it's more human. So I found it like for the translation scenarios, it actually works really well.
That's interesting because in Belgium, they have a lot of particular regional dialects and a lot of slang. I wonder if it would know how to do that, because obviously most of the translators can't do that. But I wonder if it would know that.
And even if you wanted to bring the dialect out, that's where you might also apply like a few shot example, where you might actually give the GPT a few examples, like input output examples of what you expect. Hey, this is the Belgian sort of conversation that I want to experience, and then just giving that to ChatGPT, and that actually learns from your few shot examples to give you the answer that you're looking for. So yeah, that's one thing you can actually do in that scenario, which I think will help.
That would be very cool, actually, for the international conferences that I do. That would be a great demo.
Yep.
I'm always looking for slang when I go to international conferences. Like I normally name that, if I've made a chatbot, I normally name it in something regional slang. So like my Ewok or Shih Tzu, like when I went to Netherlands, I called it like Shishuka or Plusy, something like that, which were not even like the real words for Ewok and puppy, but
Yeah,
were
right.
sort of words for sort of fluffy pet, and kind of where you would see a fluffy pet in the street and you'd just be like, oh, little cutie pie kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so there were kind of like regional words like that.
Yeah. That's like very cool. And yeah, one of I guess the differentiators of having a large language model like ChatGPT, it just knows so much about the world. There were some recent articles that you're seeing that some of these AI models are starting to actually become like sentient. They're starting to like express emotion, which is like really, really cool and amazing.
So we had it. I was on a panel recently where we were talking about that, and I said it's software, not sentience. Absolutely not. But it's interesting when you get into what does that really mean. So someone said, could these chatbots and things pass the Turing test? And I said, well, easily. Turing test just simply says, can you tell whether it's a human or a bot? Can it fool a human into thinking it might be a human? Yeah, absolutely. Easily could do that. Responsible AI says you should not write one that will do that. It should absolutely declare that it is a bot and not a human. But it could do it. It could easily do it.
Yeah.
And then the question around sentience, well, does it matter, I suppose, is my question, in that if the tool can answer questions like a human can answer them, and it does, then what is sentient? Like,
Yeah,
why do we
exactly.
care
And
whether it's sentience or not?
I guess that, further reinforces the whole idea of having these responsible AI principles in the first place, right? Because, we should be able, we need to be able to communicate that, hey, this is a bot. You're interacting with an artificial intelligent agent. This isn't a human person. And so immediately, the Turing test of whether you can tell whether, a computer program is a human or not, and that's why we have like captures, right? It's to help to determine whether that's an actual bot or a user, and so that whole idea of the Turing test, I think definitely further reinforces those responsible AI like principles and why they're important in like practice.
Those captures, do you not think that is a problem that computers could solve? Because it seems to me, like, why couldn't you use computer vision to do that? It can identify. It's asking what is a street lamp or what is a road crossing.
Yeah.
Computer vision can absolutely identify those
A
things.
bit of like Selenium in like a headless browser, like physically clicking. I don't see how that can fail, but apparently there are a lot of engineering that goes into actually those captures. But theoretically, I can see it being very possible to bypass a captcha as a robot.
Yeah, it seems like individually each of those skills would be something that you could code something to do, and then putting them together, well, doesn't seem so impossible anymore when you look at how ChatGPT is working, and it seems like they are putting all the different skills together, all the different cognitive services together into these tools in order to get them to not just be good narrowly in their narrow AI forms, but also across the board. But yeah, like people will talk about, oh, but it might be biased, and I say, well, yeah, it's biased because we're biased. It's gotten our data, and so if you are trying to
Exactly.
compare it to a human being, it's very like a human being because it absolutely thinks like us because we've trained it to think like us. If you are worried about the mistakes it might make, well, it makes less than a human being. At a certain point, I wonder, is sentience something that the AI is striving for, or is sentience really such a low bar to it that it wouldn't even bother with that?
I think it will also just depend on that's a good question. I think it also has a lot of influence from how the users interact with the bot. It's gonna take, what you're saying, and it's gonna naturally just improve the connectedness of these neurons in this neural network. So the more people use it, the more stronger this bot becomes in order getting really good at answering what these users are saying. So I think that's a very important idea to bring to the surface, because it's quite an interesting one.
In all the movies and all the science fiction books, they always said, don't connect the AI to the internet. The minute you connect it to the internet, it will destroy the world.
And look where we are.
Yeah. Well, ChatGPT, the free version, not attached to the internet. And so where I was chatting to that originally, it was quite interesting. I had asked it to write me a post for LinkedIn about GPT-4, and it wrote me a really, really good post about it, including links to Microsoft websites referencing GPT-4 documentation. And I clicked on the links because I was so impressed with it. The links did not work at all. They looked like great links though. They had like Microsoft.com docs, all of this. Like it was the right structure. And they didn't work. So I said to it, are you sure about those links? And it said, well, I don't have access to the internet, so I can't check the links. And I said, if you don't have access to the internet, how can you write anything about GPT-4, which was only released just recently?
Yeah.
And it said, I don't want to talk about this anymore. You should be aware that I'm only learning, which does sound like it's an AI having a strop because it's upset about being caught lying or hallucinating, as you said. But
yeah.
Nevertheless, that article it wrote for me was really good. And I used that article. I just changed the links to actual current links that worked. And so even when it's hallucinating, it can still write very good nonsense, which is actually truth. Well, I guess it's truth in that it didn't write anything in there that wasn't true. It had just extrapolated what GPT-4 was going to be based on what it knew about the older versions and itself. So
Yep.
I think it's better than us.
And so, yeah, I guess on that point, you know, for those people that are like, oh, it can also generate code, that's scary. Is my job as a software engineer going to exist? I can most definitely tell you it's not going to affect anything in that regard, because it's, as Michelle said, like it's a tool that is used to like assist, and I've used it to generate some code, and it's good at generating some code, but some of the code it's generated for me looks like it's correct. You know, if I didn't know much about writing code and I told it to generate code, I would think that, oh yeah, this is fine to run, but it was riddled with bugs and just did not work. It was mentioning functions that didn't even exist in the API reference. So
and you say that, Joseph, but Copilot fixed that for me. It wrote the code, then it had the squiggles underneath saying, you know, it doesn't understand these references or whatever, and I said, can you fix that? And it fixed it. So,
but you have to actually know that there is an issue in your code to tell it to fix it. If you just like,
it tells you there's an issue in your code, the linter tells you there's an issue. But indeed, if you don't understand what you're doing at all, then it's not going to be the best code that you're writing. And generally what I like is I like to press that. If you press that control and enter, then it'll bring up 10 options, 10 different pieces of code for the part that you want to put in. And you can look through them, and you can either use, which is what I would have done previously, use the code that looks like the code I would have written, because that's the way I think that's the code I would have written if I had thought of it. Or once you get into it, you can look at the other pieces of code and you can think, is there a better piece of code here than mine? Because I know I am not the best coder, and there are better, more efficient, cleaner ways of writing code. But in the past, I wouldn't have used those because I didn't understand that code. Whereas now I can ask the Copilot chat to explain that code to me, and it will teach me as if it was you teaching it to me. And then I can use that code because it's explained it. So they say that developers are using it for a lot of the tedious bits, the repetitive bits of their code. There's a lot of stuff that you would have been repeating through and through and all of that. They're using it a lot for that, and it's really speeding up the work that they do. But then they can focus on the more interesting pieces, the things that haven't been written before, or the things that they haven't used before in their company, but it still helps.
But you do need to understand code is the bottom line, right? Like, you know, you throw code, you don't want to be running, you know, code that ChatGPT has built in a production system, right? Like that's the bottom line. It's not a good idea. Being able to understand that and say, hey, this code isn't going to break my system and delete everything is very important knowledge to have. So it's still
I think
important.
The security risks around is there, you know, are hackers using it to inject malicious bits of code into your code? Now Copilot itself does search for that, does scan for that kind of stuff, but as people get more and more inventive to try and get around these things, it won't always, you know, you might be a better person to pick out what is the problem than the AI. especially if the AI has been taught that this is good code.
Yep.
So yeah, but I think the key point is when I was like 20 years ago, they told us AI was going to come along and it was going to take away all of our jobs so that we could just lie on deck chairs drinking cocktails all day while the machines did our work. What I find is that I am working so much harder today than I ever was 20 years ago. The more AI there is, the more work there is. And it isn't that AI is creating work, it's that humans are greedy. And when they see that stuff can be optimized and more tools can do more stuff, they just give you more work. So yeah, we will never be out of work while we work in tech, I
We'll
think.
never be satisfied. We'll never be satisfied.
Indeed. All right, this is awesome, Joseph. I think I'm probably going to split this into your technical lesson and our little chat afterwards and put them separately as recordings because
Sounds good.
I think they stand alone.
Sounds good.
All right, no final questions from anyone else?
I think that's it.